Welcome! This is Dr. Plague, and this is a harpsichord. If you're not familiar with a harpsichord, it is a keyboard instrument, and although it looks like a piano, there are some differences. This particular harpsichord also has a few problems, and today we'll go over them and see if we can come up with some 3D printed solutions. This should be an interesting episode, so please stick around. So first, let's look at the differences between a piano and a harpsichord. And by the way, this harpsichord does need a tuning, since it is greatly out of tune, but I'll do that at a later date. Let's take a listen to some notes played on the harpsichord. Now, compare that to the piano. Can you hear the difference? Both instruments have strings, but perhaps the biggest difference between the two is how they get their strings to vibrate, since the vibration of the strings is what creates the sounds. You see, the way the piano works is that it uses little hammers to strike the strings, and because of this, some people call pianos percussive instruments. Harpsichords, on the other hand, use little picks called plectrums to pluck the strings, much like how you pluck a guitar string. Let's see if I can get the camera in here to show you. I'll take this cover off, and by the way, it is called a jack rail. Underneath it, you'll see a bunch of these little things called jacks sticking up, and each one has a plectrum for plucking a string. You can see when I press a key, one of the jacks will pop up and cause the plectrum to pluck a string. There is a tongue in each jack that allows the plectrum to move out of the way when the jack comes back down. The plectrum is installed in the tongue, and the tongue is held on the jack with a pivot point. Kind of a cool idea, isn't it? Now, from what I understand, this particular harpsichord was made from a kit, and it is quite old. I'm not the one that made it, but I now own it, and it does have some problems that we'll take a look at. Most of the problems are in the way the jacks were made, so let's take a close-up look at one. What I consider to be one of the biggest problems is the plectrum itself. Now, harpsichord plectrums are usually made out of one of three materials: the quills from bird feathers, leather, or plastic, usually Delrin plastic. The plectrums in this harpsichord appear to be made from what looks like nylon fishing line. This is just weird. I mean, look at this. Little holes were drilled into the tongues so that the fishing line could be installed. You can see that they are shaped by cutting sort of a pointed tip on them. One of the big problems with this is that they can easily slide around in the holes, and they need to be constantly adjusted for proper playability. Since they're cylindrical, they can easily rotate too, so we have some issues here. You can see the spring for the tongue is made from some music wire, and sometimes they get misaligned and need to be adjusted. One of the other big problems is with the dampers, which are made from red-colored felt. The purpose of the dampers is to stop a string from vibrating when the key is no longer pressed. On these jacks, they are simply glued on, and if you take a look down all the jacks, you can see that several of them are missing. If we want to replace them, we need to glue new ones on and wait for the glue to dry. Let's see if we can find a better solution for this. So, what I'm looking to do is to come up with a new style jack that I can 3D print that can replace all the current jacks. The goal is to create a jack that does not need to be constantly adjusted to be playable. I'm not looking to create a miraculously perfect solution, but rather just a good solution to create a playable instrument that I can enjoy. Now, one of the first things I did was take some measurements of one of the old jacks so that I can create a model in FreeCAD. And here is what I came up with for a jack. Notice that I came up with kind of a gripper to hold a felt damper in place. This way I can easily replace the dampers when they wear out since they're not glued in place. Also, I extended a thin piece of plastic to act as the spring for the tongue. It can't shift locations and will never need to be adjusted. It will always be at the correct location. And you can see little holes here for the pivot, which I'll just cut up little pieces of paper clips to use as the pivots. Remember my video on the $10 tree items? Now I have a use for the paper clips. I slightly oversized these two holes so that the pivot easily moves, and I'll make the hole in the tongue tighter to hold the pivot in place. And speaking of the tongue, here is the 3D model of it. I placed a rectangular hole in it to hold the plectrum in place, and you can see that I am trying to 3D print a plectrum along with the tongue. I do have some authentic Delrin plastic here for making plectrums, which I bought from a harpsichord supply house, but instead, let's see if we can 3D print those also. I can always 3D print more when they wear out. You can see that I connected the plectrum to the tongue so I can easily pull it off the 3D printer build plate. We can cut it off later. You can also notice that I am placing the chamfer on the tongue face down to make it easier to grab it off the build plate, since my printer can easily print that angle, and small parts can sometimes be tough to pull off the build plate, so I'm going to make it as easy as possible. And here is how I sliced the jack body and tongue in Cura. By the way, if you'd like to learn more about how to design and 3D print a custom part, then please watch my other video on that. I'll place a link in the description below. Now let's take this design to the 3D printer and see how it turns out. And there's the finished jack. The first thing I'm going to do is to cut the plectrum from the tongue and insert it into the tongue. We can adjust it later, but now I'm going to cut off a little piece of a paper clip to use as the pivot rod. That should work. Now I'll assemble the tongue into the jack. Perfect. Let's take this to the harpsichord, adjust the plectrum, and give it a try. I want the plectrum sticking out enough to pluck the string, but not too far. Then I'll trim a little off the back. Now, let's put it in and see if it works. Not bad. I'll fold up a little felt and stick it into the gripper so we have a damper. I can make small adjustments to this if necessary. This is playing pretty good. We need the jack rail on to ensure that the jack doesn't shoot up too far and get stuck. I'm going to 3D print a few more of these jacks to get a better feel of this. And here it is with more 3D printed jacks. I'm kind of liking it. This is very nice. I'm going to go ahead and 3D print the rest of the jacks and give this instrument a good tuning. If you'd like to hear how this thing sounds with all new 3D printed jacks and fully tuned, then please leave some comments below. If I get enough interest, I'll make another video to show you the finished project. So, if you like this video, be sure to peck at that like button, and don't forget to subscribe, and peck at that notification bell to be notified of all my new videos as they become available. Thank you, and we'll see you next time, right here on Dr. Plague.